Om Namo
Namo
Bhagavate
Bhagavate
Vasudevaya.
Vasudevaya. Om Namo
Om Namo
Bhagavate
Bhagavate
Vasudevaya.
Vasudevaya. Om
Om
Namo
Namo
Bhagavate
Bhagavate
Vasudevaya.
Vasudevaya.
I'm going to share my screen to show a little bit of a recap of what we've done. I like making these little graphs here. Let's recap where we're at. So we've did the introduction to the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu and the Eastern Division, the varieties of Bhakti, you know, the different types of Bhakti, then Rasa, or one's relation to Krishna, or actually this section here, the Southern Division is Bhava, are the components of rasa, like ecstasy, what the different what makes rasa, the ingredients of rasa. Do you see my mouse? When I move my mouse, you see it? Okay. And then in this section right here, the primary rasas, then the secondary rasas. That's the whole content of the Nectar of Devotion, or the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. But in this introductory course, which we're about to take a break now, but there's a total, I think, of 15 classes. So this is class 4, there's class 5. And then, or I don't know, it's probably class 5, but we're doing chapter 4. So we're gonna do, like, I think till chapter 14 or something. And actually this just covers, we're just covering the first 2 points, the qualities of pure bhakti we see, and then bhakti in practice as there. That's actually the only chapters that we're, well, the sections that we're covering. But maybe another point would be nice to do everything. I really like to do it, but just for this introduction, that's what we're doing. So we talked about the qualities of pure bhakti: removes distress, brings auspiciousness, makes liberation look insignificant, which actually was a big topic of today. And also it's rarely achieved, and it's composed of a unique condensed bliss, and is the only means to attract Krishna. So these are the 6 characteristics of bhakti. And there's different stages also: sadhana bhakti, bhava bhakti, and prema bhakti. These qualities kind of gradually appear from these levels of bhakti. And again, we're looking at the progression of bhakti. That's what chapter 2 and 3 talks about that. So it starts here. The start of bhakti is that somehow or other one becomes attracted to hear about Krishna. That's the start of bhakti. Then one starts practicing. Sadhana bhakti, sadhana means practice, so bhakti in practice. And then there's the rules and regulation. And then the spontaneous aspects of bhakti. One starts developing attachment and starts to be more spontaneous instead of like following because he has to. One develops a taste for it. It becomes more natural. Raganuga bhakti. Then bhava bhakti is where one really start tasting the ecstasy that comes from bhakti. And then prema bhakti is bhakti in pure love of God. So that's the general progression. And then, you know, as we progress, what makes that we progress? What is the criteria that shows our progress? Well, is our love for Krishna. As our love for Krishna increases, and it increases primarily by hearing and chanting about him. And then in these, I don't know exactly where do they fit, you know, if they fit here and there, or they just fit within the sadhana bhakti. But there's adhikaris, means like the qualifications of person when he practices bhakti. And one is kanishta, means like a beginner. His weak is fate, is weak, so he has weak fate. But as one becomes a madhyama, intermediate stage, a little bit more advanced, then his knowledge is there, but he has an amateur knowledge. Like he has some knowledge, but he has a stronger fate. And then the highest platform is one becomes expert in knowledge of the scriptures, and also knowledge of logic. He's good at presenting the conclusions of Bhakti to all types of audiences, and he's convinced himself. So he's very convinced and he's very knowledgeable. Intermediate stage is convinced, but might not be so knowledgeable. So these are different categories of the practitioner of Bhakti. So we've seen that, and today is the Bhakta's aspirations. Bhakta is one who practices Bhakti, or it's another way of writing devotee, of saying devotee. So the Bhakta's aspirations, and this is the topic of today. I think we have someone's going to join us. I think Brihat is about to join us, because I just saw it pop up. So this is chapter 3 and 4. It starts a little bit at the end of chapter 3 of Nectar Devotion and goes on to chapter 4. That's the main of it, but there's also another topic about like devotees of Krishna, that are distinguished from devotees of other forms of Vishnu, that we can touch upon at the end. But the core of it is what the devotee rejects and what he accepts. And we may not be on that platform, but we want to aspire to develop these desires. Mm-hmm. And so we'll look at these, and then after that we'll discuss it here at the bottom, what's being said here. Again, I remember that this is all part of the resource page that there. I include these pictures. I like to do these little graphs. I like to summarize. And again, this is simply a vulgarization of what's there. I'm not able to fit everything there. If one wants to look at all the details, of course, he should consult the books. But I like to summarize as much as possible. But there's always a little bit of, you always lose a bit when you summarize, huh? So you reject, a devotee rejects liberation and material happiness and material opulence. And liberation is defined as spiritual emancipation of Brahmananda. Oops, there's a little mistake here. I'll have to correct that. Brahmananda is the bliss of Brahman realization. And there's also a famous verse which talks about a devotee does not even accept the 5 types of liberation, even if devoid of service. Now, if this is devoid of service, then why accept that? And what are these 5 types of? It is to become one with the Lord, to be one with the Lord. 2, to reside on his planet. 3, to gain his association. 4, to have his opulences. And 5, to possess similar bodily features as his. And it is described actually that the first one is contrary to devotion. One cannot perform devotion if one if one doesn't have a separate existence from the Lord. If one has merged into the Brahman effulgence, he lost his individuality, so therefore he cannot serve Krishna. So that one is contrary to devotion. These other ones are not necessarily contrary to devotion, meaning they're not unfavorable. You can still serve Krishna if you are on his planet. You can still serve Krishna if you associate with him. You can still serve Krishna if you have his same opulence. Of course, it's not necessarily the same, but you share in that opulence and you share in similar bodily features. Like in the Vaikuntha planets, the spiritual world, they say they have the same bodily features as Krishna. They have like Vishnu has 4 arms, but those liberated persons also has 4 arms that are in the spiritual world. But the point is that it's secondary. Like one should not aspire for these things simply for those things, but he should inspire only to serve Krishna. There was a point there that's the ultimate thing, is to serve Krishna. One might perform bhakti for a desire for power and happiness. And one might think, oh, going to the spiritual world, for example, will give me happiness. Or going to the spiritual world will give me power because I'll have the same opulence as Krishna, you know? That is actually not the right motive. One should only do it out of love. And these are just consequences of serving Krishna. Krishna might award it or not. We don't care. But simply to serve him. And we're going to touch that more upon in the proper mood of what are the aspirations that we accept, that we want. So, you know, if liberation is such a high thing, and the spiritual, the happiness that comes from either Brahman realization or of being a Vaikuntha, that doesn't compare to anything in the material world. Nothing in the material world, sorry, I'm going to say nothing in the material world compares to that happiness there, you know? So if a devotee doesn't even want liberation, what to speak of material opulence? And then there's a famous verse of Lord Chaitanya, which says, Nadanam najanam nasudarim kavitam va jagadisha kamai mama janmani janmanishwari bhavatat bhakti. Is that it is in the Shishashtakam, is the 8 prayers that he wrote down. He said, I don't want Nadanam, I don't want wealth, immense wealth. Najanam, I don't want followers. Neither do I want a beautiful woman. Here I put it like gender neutral here, beautiful spouse. I don't want any of these things. I just want, and also he indirectly says he doesn't want liberation, because he just says, birth after birth, I just want to serve you. You know, I want uninterrupted service towards you, Aituki, uninterrupted, unmotivated service. So he doesn't even want liberation because he's talking birth after birth. I don't care taking birth after birth as long as I serve you. And then there's other opulences. And this is, all of these I extracted from the verses that Rupa Goswami does. Because Rupa Goswami, he just quotes verse after verse from the Bhagavatam. Actually, he goes through the whole Bhagavatam, canto by canto. He starts at canto 3. Then canto 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And in each canto, he extracts those verses where you have devotees that talk about how they're just satisfied serving Krishna and that they don't want anything from him. They don't want material opulence. They don't want liberation. So I kind of extracted all the types of desires they said they didn't want. So that's from Lord Chaitanya's verse here, these first 2. But then mystic powers, they're not even interested in mystic powers. They're having control over this material world, or lordship of even the whole universe, what to speak of Earth, you know? There's some positions in the universe where you can control the whole universe. Like you can be Indra, you can be Brahma, like none of these actually a devotee wants. Or promotion to higher planets. To enjoy, you know, you can go to heaven, the heavenly planets. You can enjoy a lot of sense gratification. There's a lot of wealth there. You have a lot of influence there. You know, there's a lot of beautiful people there, and all types of enjoyment there. So all of these, ultimately, a devotee doesn't want them. We might have them in our heart, but we want to work on getting rid of them. The devotee, ultimately, he doesn't want to. But why? Like, we have to replace it. We can't just reject desire. We have to replace it with something better. And there's a verse in Bhagavad Gita that says, Aparam drishtva nivartate. That only upon seeing something higher, param drishtva, seeing something param higher, then nirvartate, one gives up. We call it, we have kind of a slogan in ISKCON is the higher taste. We have to develop the higher taste. There's even a cool book that came out like that, The Higher Taste. But the principle in devotional service is that we want to develop a higher taste, and therefore all the other things, all our unwanted desires will go away. We have to fill our heart with proper desires. So ultimately, what's accepted is that we want to be developing our love of God. But we also want to develop ecstasy in that. We want to develop taste in that. There's actually a verse again in Shishashtakam where Lord Chaitanya says, when I chant your holy names, Krishna, when will my eyes will cry like torrents of rain? When will the bodies on my head, when my voice choke up? These are all signs of ecstasy. And when will my hair stand on end at the recitation of your holy name? And why do we want these symptoms of ecstasy? Well, because it's a symptom that we care, that we have emotions for Krishna. If sometimes we can be apathetic of somebody else's suffering or somebody else's happiness. Usually we might be apathetic to people we don't really know, people we don't really care about. I mean, ultimately it'd be nice to have compassion for everyone, but it happens. Sometimes we're indifferent to other people. But if it's somebody near to us, near and dear to us, it affects us more. We want our children to be happy. We're sad when our children are sad because we have that attachment that's there. So same thing for there, we want to have emotions for Krishna. And the symptoms of those emotions are ecstasies for Krishna. So ultimately, a devotee does want to relish the ocean of nectar. And how does he relish this ocean of nectar? Well, by associating with the Lord and his devotees. We relish that. And by engaging in 9 processes of bhakti. If you look at all these verses that Rupa Goswami quotes, a devotee will sometimes focus on 1 or 2. I just want to hear about you, or I just want to chant your glories. I just want to associate with devotees. I want to have millions of ears so I can just hear and chant about you. I just want to serve you lotus feet. I just want to worship you. I just want to see you. All these varieties of prayers, like George Harrison, my sweet Lord. Was it the song again? I really want to see you, or exactly, my sweet Lord. So like that's actually a proper prayer. We want that. That's a good prayer. So we want to worship him. We want to pray to him. We want to follow his instructions. We want to serve him as a friend. We want to surrender to him completely. And actually, if you read through the Bhagavatam, there's all types of wonderful stories of devotees doing that. Maharaj Parikshit, he was the best hearer. Sukadeva Goswami, the best speaker. Prahlad Maharaj, he was very good at remembering the Lord. Lakshmi, serving the lotus feet of the Lord. And there was Ambarish Maharaj, also a story in the Bhagavatam, very rich. He was the king of the world, but he was so absorbed in worshiping Krishna. And I don't remember who was praying. I think it was, Akrura, the prayers of the Lord. And following his instruction, I think it was Hanuman. His friend was Arjuna, was there, and completely surrendering everything. Bali Maharaj, these are all examples, and all the stories are there in the Bhagavatam to give us examples of how these people did it. But it was not necessarily easy. They had to go through their own struggles. And of course, all this was parts of the pastimes of the Lord. And there's so many stories in the Bhagavatam where actually devotees do come with Krishna with mixed desires, but ultimately Krishna takes care of it and purifies it. So still, if Krishna pleases, And that's the thing we have to remember, is that Krishna will give you whatever he wants to give you. And we have to be satisfied with that. So still, if Krishna pleases, he may, I should have said may, well, he will fulfill any desire the bhakta may have within the core of his or her heart. You know? Krishna may do that, you know. We're serving him. We want to develop our love for him. We want to relish his service, but we have some unwanted things there in our heart. But sometimes Krishna will fulfill it in ways that are that purify us. Actually, there's actually a story of a friend of Krishna, Sudama Vipra. He was actually very poor. And actually, he was attached to being poor. Sometimes we can have attachments like that. He was attached to being poor, and his wife was like, oh, "Come on, we're hungry. Go beg to Krishna. You know, we're so destitute. We don't have proper clothing. We don't have proper food. No, Krishna. You know, Krishna. He's like a king now. Just go and see him. You know, he can give you everything. Just go and see. Oh, and by the way, just take this rice. They had like this very cheap kind of quality. It's actually flat rice, chip rice. Like it's low quality rice. You don't even have to cook it. You just have to soak it, and then you can eat it. So it's just very kind of cheap quality rice. He put it underneath his armpits or something to carry it or something. And then he was like hiding it from Krishna. He went inside Krishna, and Krishna worshipped him because he was a Brahmana. So Dhamma was a Brahmana, and Brahmanas are higher socially than Kshatriyas. Krishna was serving as a Kshatriya, so he was respecting that way as the priestly class was worshiping him and honoring him, and Sudama was like embarrassed. It's like, no, I came to see my friend, and you're worshiping me here like this, and said, oh, I know, but Krishna knows everything. I know you brought me a gift. Give me that gift, and he somehow or other he didn't want to give it to him. Sudama Vipra didn't want to give him it, and Krishna snatched it from him, and he ate it and said, "Wow, this is the best food I ever ate." And then Sudama Vipra was going back, and he was walking back to his place. He says, "Who am I? You know, I'm just this poor Brahmana, this sinful Brahmana, and who's Krishna? You know, he's thinking like that while he's walking back to his place. Who's Krishna? He's the husband of the goddess of fortune. You know, and he embraced me with his two arms. That's so wonderful." And then when Sudama Vipra came back to his cottage, he didn't recognize anything because there was servants awaiting him. There was a brand new mansion, and his wife was no more in destitute clothes, but, you know, in nice, clean, opulent clothes. And he was like bewildered, and it's like he was like living in a palace now. What's happened? And it's actually so Krishna awarded him the opulence, the material opulence, you can say. And actually, it's noted, or there's a note on that. It says that actually Vipra had that attachment to being poor. So Krishna even got rid of that. So the point is that, and that's actually, there's a key verse also in here, in the 6th canto by Shiva, and he says, Na hayana parasarve, na kutaschana bibyati, sarva pavarga narakesh, zvapi tulyartadarshina. That's the vision we want to have, is that the devotees actually, under no circumstance, they're afraid. They're not afraid to go anywhere or be anywhere. No situation is frightening for them. Either it may be in the highest planet in this world, or the lowest, the heavenly, or hell even, you know. For a devotee, it's all the same. It's all the same, you know, because he can serve Krishna anywhere. That's the goal, is that we can serve Krishna anywhere, you know, and that's the satisfaction that we want to have. It's not easy, you know. It's like we live in this world, we have aspirations like, I want to pay off my house, only if Krishna gave me enough money to pay off my house, all my desires would be fulfilled, no, but I have to work for that, but even in that situation, like, I can still be satisfied. I can still find satisfaction. Or else in the material world, there's always something else that's not good enough, or that's not good enough. There's always something. But we have to learn to have this satisfaction. And our satisfaction should come from our relationship with Krishna, because there's no impediment to that. And that's the idea of relishing that, because we can always follow his instructions. We can always remember him. We can always talk about him. So we have to develop. So that's the real liberation in one sense. That's the real. Actually, this is a verse that comes up later in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. That one whose mind and intelligence and words and activities are dedicated to Krishna, he's already liberated. So why do you want liberation? You already have it, and that's real transcendence. Real transcendence can be here now, just by hearing about Krishna. But our problem is that we don't have the taste. If I go back to the Shishashtakam, Lord Chaitanya in the second verse, he says, Nam nam makari bahuda nijasava saktis. I forget, I'm minded. Say it, Briyat. Nam nam makari bahuda nijasava saktis. Tata pitani amitas marini nakala. Itad rishi tava kripa bhagavan mamapi. Durdevam bidishami hajanina. He says that, your names of Krishna, you have so many names. Krishna, Govinda, even in other languages, they have Yahweh, Christ even. Those are different names of the Lord, In all of them, you've invested, your powers. Krishna's present in his name. You've invested your powers. And there's no hard and fast rules. One can do it anywhere at any time. There's no hard rules in chanting these names. But I'm sort and fortunate to have no taste for your names. So that's our goal. Our goal is to develop a taste for the holy name, to develop a taste to hear about Krishna, to develop a taste in serving him, to develop a taste. And actually, that satisfaction is there. If we had, I had wonderful moments in my life where there's so much richness in that. There's so much satisfaction coming from doing those activities. I want to finish with one story and then open up for discussion. There was a friend told me the story. He was in Brazil. It's like a farm community, like Sharanagati. It's a rural community there. A little smaller, but they're in the beautiful mountains of near, not Rio de Janeiro, but another city down south. Anyways, Gaura Vrindavan was a place. It's a beautiful place. I saw pictures of it. They're like in the mountains, and you see the ocean from the mountains. It's like a beautiful place, tropical place. Anyway, so it gets hot there, and there's this lady working hard. She likes to work hard serving in the kitchen. She liked to cook, but she would cook with wood stoves and get really hot. And she was like working hard and stuff like that. And one devotee, I think it was a new devotee, came up to her and said, aren't you looking forward to be in the spiritual world, when you don't have to work so hard like this, where everything's just so easy and so natural, And then she took, like there was smoke in her little kitchen and stuff like that. She took some charcoals, like she put it on her, like this, and says, "This is the spiritual world. I'm serving Krishna right now, in all these troubles. It's just out of love, It's like you have descriptions in the Bhagavatam where you have Yasoda. She's preparing butter for Krishna. She's sweating. She's working hard, but she's chanting the glories of Krishna while she's doing it, because there's great pleasure in that. And that's the goal, is that as we become purified, that pleasure just becomes bigger and bigger. And we want to do these things. And ultimately, whatever we do, like we fill our lives with service and with responsibility. But ultimately, all these are, like, in one sense, secondary. That ultimately the first thing we are is we are a devotee of Krishna. And everything else, it's kind of like, I'm a devotee of Krishna, but my propensity is I like to, teach, I like to organize, I like to do this, I like to do that. But I'm using whatever my nature I've been given in the service of Krishna. And that's the main point. So all my little project, all my little things are just excuses for serving Krishna. I have some time, I think about how I can do this for Krishna's service, or I study about him, I learn about him, or I hear something about his glories, I hear a kirtan, because I'm a devotee of Krishna. That's our first identity. And that can be done anywhere. And everything else is secondary. I'm a simple servant of Guru and Krishna. And there can be great satisfaction in just that. And whatever form it takes, whatever form that service does, it was Yamuna Devi was saying like that. Says, she was a great cook, she was a great singer, but she said, I never considered myself as a singer or as a cook. I always considered myself as a devotee who cooks, as a devotee who sings. Brihat is a devotee who farms. You're devotees who cook. And that's where satisfaction comes from. Okay, any thoughts or questions on this?
I have a question. I guess I'm just a little bit confused because we talk a lot about going home to Godhead. So how is that different than, like, being liberated and wanting to be on one of the planets or in his association? Like, I don't get the subtlety there.
The subtlety is that Krishna does whatever he wants. Either we go back to Godhead or not, it's not up to us. It's up to him. The reason why we want to go back home, back to Godhead, is to go to Krishna. And in one sense, also going back to Godhead, it's not necessarily a place. It's a state of consciousness. It's where we belong. So in that sense, in a figurative way, we can accept it, like we're going home back to Godhead. But also, like, just as a motto, we're all motivated like that. We all want out of this material world. It's natural that we have that. So as a beginning, like, it's a good statement for the beginners, going back home, back to God, but it's also we learn that it's a state of consciousness. Like when we, like, that's a more kind of subtlety there. Like, okay, we're praying. Like, I remember going on the street and there was this picture. Let me try to show it. And then Brihat can speak. He has his hand raised. Let me just show this image and then I'll finish with that, and then you can comment. Was it the Bhagavatam cover? The first canto. Let's see if I can find this image. Here, this one. I was going on the street. I would say, let me make it bigger here. Yeah, you see here, the image here? And I would just simply point to people. I says, see, this is the material world and this is the spiritual world. Where are we right now? And they would all say the material world. Everybody naturally knew they were in the material. And say, you see, our goal is to go back to the spiritual world. And this is what this book is about, And yes, our goal is we want to be with Krishna. We want to be in the spiritual world with Krishna. But that's up to him. That's up to him. We just want to serve him, actually. And that's the proper mood. It's all a question of mood. We want to go home back to Godhead, but actually our mood is just to serve Krishna, no matter what. Like we shouldn't be motivated that, oh, I only serve you, Krishna, if you bring me back to your abode, you know? Okay, Brihat.
There's also, from another angle, to go back to the spiritual world, you actually have to be in a, like you have to be in a state of full Krishna consciousness. So they go hand in hand in the sense that to go back, like we can want to go back to Godhead, but if what follows that, if we want to go back to Godhead, then we have to develop Krishna consciousness. And what Damodar is saying is that when we develop Krishna consciousness, then we won't really, when it comes to that point, we actually won't really care where we're situated, whether it be the material world or the spiritual world. At the same time, it's described that in the spiritual world, it is described as a geographical location. And in the spiritual world, all the people there are fully Krishna conscious. So it's actually a very, like compared to the material world, which sometimes is compared to a prison, or sometimes is compared to I heard one comparison, it's like a insane asylum where everybody's not in a normal condition of mind, and sometimes in the hot, you know, like in that, in those, in a like a place like that, the people there will fight with each other, and so you get a lot of like friction in a place like that. So the spiritual world is a place where everybody's in their normal state of consciousness, and it's actually a very pleasant place to be. So in that sense, we want to go back to Godhead because it is a much more, for people who want to serve Krishna, it is a much more favorable environment to do it. But at the same time, to go, yeah, so the other thing was that to go back there, we have to develop Krishna consciousness. So in that sense, like your question, you're saying what's the subtlety there? There actually isn't any difference between developing Krishna consciousness and going back to Godhead. Like you have to develop that full state of Krishna consciousness, that full surrender, in order to go back to the spiritual world. I don't know if that touches on your question.
It does. I guess I'm also just wondering, like, we want to gain, like it says to gain his association, but don't we want that? Like, is it a different flavor of his association? Like, I thought we
Well,
wanted to serve him.
If it's devoid of service, you know, just like the ant might have association with the spiritual master, but the disciple has a deeper connection in his association, and his association is not limited to like physically being there, but you serve his instructions, you associate with him. We want association, we want to associate with someone we love, but if it's devoid of service, then what's the point? You know?
Yeah,
Can I elaborate on that?
Yeah, and also I want to say one thing there is that, like you said, the mood of the devotee is the mood of the devotee is he's happy just serving, but Krishna awards, you know, and there's verses like that where all of the devotees are just satisfied serving me, I award them everything. You know, Krishna says I award them everything, but their mood is not necessarily like that. So, but we as a devotee, we're just trying to develop that mood, like Brihat says. They ultimately, we don't.
Can I elaborate on that, Damodar?
We don't want something from Krishna. You know, our love should be free from any want from Krishna. Yes, we got it. Please.
And this is at the beginning of the Nectar of Devotion also, but I like your example of an ant. Like even for us, like, you know, like we're getting the mosquito wants our association, right? it wants our association so that it can like, but for us it's a bother, right? The mosquito, it wants our association, but it's actually, its association is bothersome. So when association is devoid of service, then it's
Useless.
for Krishna. It's, there's actually the connection with Krishna and connection with anybody comes through service. So even though we may be in physical proximity to somebody else, if there's no service there, then there's no really connection, there's no really relationship. So the anybody, but it's coming from Krishna, the relationship with Krishna is based on service. And when we serve Krishna, then that's when we actually really feel the connection and really feel his association.
So it's really about like the mood and your consciousness.
It's just like, a famous person,
Yeah.
a famous person,
Yeah.
or a rich person, an important person. People will gravitate towards them, but for the wrong reasons. They want their fame, they want their richness, and it's like. So we can do the same thing with Krishna. We want to partake of, the greatness of his planet. We want to partake his greatness. We want to partake of the richness he has, the opulences he has. But that's not a proper mood, which is, again, we don't want to exploit Krishna. It's not out of love. And actually, those who experience the most pleasure is not in what God has, but in who God is. And that's what we want to be. We want to be in love with Krishna himself as a person, not because he's, anyway, that's a more esoteric things. And that's actually the Nectar of Devotion kind of goes a lot into that. Like all the later chapters, it's all about why Krishna is such a loving person and what all the sweetness of that.
Damodar, I liked when you're telling that story of Sudama Vipra, because, and you just made that point about who God is. So most I would say most religious traditions don't have a very like detailed concept of God as a person, like the personality. Whereas the Vedic scriptures and the Bhagavatam specifically, and the Gita, they're full of description of the personality of Krishna and who Krishna is, what he does, how he interacts with people. And like you were just telling that story of Sudama Vipra, when we hear about Krishna as a person, who he is and how he interacts, it's actually like the desire awakens within oneself that, oh, I wish I could also associate with Krishna, because he's, when you actually hear about who he is, what he does, how he interacts, there's nobody who has the qualities that he does and is able to interact and reciprocate with everybody like he's able to. And so by hearing, it inspires that desire to have that relationship.
And I think that's the part you missed, dear. You came a little bit later, and I showed this picture here.
Oh.
All the different stages of bhakti. And that ultimately, the point is that the more our love for Krishna progresses, the more we go higher up in bhakti. And in love for Krishna increases by hearing and chanting about him.
Yeah, for that reason.
Can I just say something?
Please.
So I was kind of in the same boat as Jade. Like I was actually this chapter really it didn't confuse me, but it's kind of the same thing where it's like I was kind of like, oh, like did I miss the whole point at first? Like 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 the material opulence part, that's completely like that was like, yeah, obviously like that is not ever a goal of this, right? But like partially like why I even came along any of this path, right, is to kind of get out of the illusion of like reality. And so like, and like, and then also too, there's lots of talk in the Gita about like trying to escape this cycle of endless births, right? And so it was like when all of a sudden I'm looking in this, so like that isn't our goal. And I was the beginning of this class, I was completely like, okay, I'm lost on this one. I don't know even if I've made any sense of it, but I feel like I've come to more of an understanding through your talk. It almost feels like in some ways that it's good to know all this stuff. So it's this idea of having the perspective to know, about the effulgence and all these other parts. But at the end of the day, just finding the love that really, I guess, our liberation is by just no matter what we end up wherever, if we're here or if we end up to another realm, just all our goal is always a service to Krishna. So
Yeah.
And like I guess that's also what Brihat was saying is if we can develop enough of a Krishna consciousness, we kind of, I guess, find liberation in our mundane everyday activities, and then I guess get rewarded. Is that right? And then but not through wanting to leave this realm. Krishna, this is kind of like, oh, you don't even want to go there, but like I'm going to give you what you don't even know you want. Or is it, or do we, is it also too like what you were saying, like where still also he may give it if it's something that's deep down in your heart? Is it something that maybe if you've developed so much Krishna conscious that it's a want that you had when you originally came in it, but it's diminished? Is that what you were talking about?
Yeah, well, you hope it will go away, but even if somehow or other it's still not there, Krishna will still take care of it somehow or other. And like ultimately, Krishna fulfills all desires, so be careful what you desire. But also, he'll even fulfill it in such a way that it will help you come closer to him. And that's the thing, is that a lot of the demigods and a lot of other personalities can award you, like Shiva is known to award whatever he's asked of, but not necessarily to the benefit of the worshiper. Whereas Krishna will always fulfill the desire, but in such a way that benefits them to develop love for him. And the Bhagavatam is full of stories like that. But Brihat has his hand raised.
Yeah, just on your point there, Mike. Sorry, I forgot exactly the very last question that you asked. Oh yeah, no, sorry, Domino, just on what you said. Yeah, definitely it mentions that Krishna will if we are attached to certain things, attached to certain desires, he will fulfill, but he'll do it in such a way that it will remove that desire. So he may give things that we want, but he does it in such a way that it will remove that desire from the heart. That's one thing. And then the other thing you were just mentioning, this is the whole lesson of the Bhagavad Gita, is that real liberation is simply, it's a matter of our consciousness. In the Bhagavad Gita at the beginning, Arjuna, he's asked to fight. That's what he's supposed to do. And at the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, he's in distress because he doesn't see how any good will come from fighting. And at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, he fights. But he fights, and the only difference, the activity is exactly the same, but the only difference is that his consciousness has changed. So this is actually this is an illusion that comes from the impersonal conception of liberation, is that in order to be liberated, we have to change our situation or our position. Like, oh, these things are causing me distress, so I have to get rid of them. Like a lot of people, when they came to Krishna consciousness, the tendency is there, like, say, for instance, oh, my family, you know, or my job, or my this or my that, it's causing me so much distress, so I should give it up and just engage in Krishna consciousness. But actually, Krishna consciousness is not dependent on the situation, and it's simply, it's not our family, it's not our job, it's not our this, it's not that that's causing the distress. It's simply our state of consciousness. And so the Bhagavad Gita teaches how we can be Krishna conscious. And so that can be applied in any situation. And so actually in any situation that we find ourselves in, we can feel the happiness of liberation and beyond. We can be situated on the spiritual platform, regardless of the external situation. Just you were mentioning that, and I'm just bringing this up because this is something that a lot of people, when they come to spiritual life, Krishna consciousness, other spiritual life, that when they come, they think, oh, I have to give things up, I have to change my situation. But that's not the, like, I won't be happy until I go back to Godhead. But this is not the, Krishna consciousness is not about changing one's situation. It's about changing one's consciousness.
It's funny you say this, Brihat, because I literally just answered last week's homework a couple hours before class started. And we talked about you missed the beginning of class before we started recording, and I had a little bit of a hard time this last week, just with, you know, we were talking about last week, like simplifying life and just keep it easy and focus on studying and stuff. And it's like, well, how do you do that with like your day-to-day stuff? And I literally went through this moment of like, why am I doing this? Like, I'm working in this material world that's taking up so much of my time. All I want to really be doing is studying Nectar of Devotion, doing my homework, getting deeper into this stuff. It's like, what? I don't have time for any of this. And it was getting like really stressful, right? And it was literally exactly what you, like, I answered in the homework that I had this all of a sudden realization that it's like, Mike, you're in the middle of a battle right now. Like, what are you talking about? Like, you're getting upset. But right now, you're in the battle to get the means for the freedom to focus all your energy on being Krishna conscious. Like, the only way you're going to be able to get there is by building the resources now. So you can't just throw it all away in order to, like, that's it, I'm just going to be a sadhu and just give up everything, go straight sannyas, and that's it, right? Like, that is just not realistic. Exactly. What is all the damage I'm going to do to my life? And it was literally like Krishna in my ear, like, Mike, like, that's not who you are. Like, that isn't, like, you got to cook, man. You know, so it was just funny you use that example right now.
Some people, there are very few people in the world who can actually do that. They can just give everything up, and they can focus the rest of their attention and lives on Krishna, 100%. And for those people, if they can do that, there's no loss in it, and there's no wrong in it if it's done in a proper way. But for most of us, what we'll do is we'll throw everything out, and then we'll realize a couple of years down the road that actually I can't maintain this level of Krishna consciousness. And then we have to go back. So instead of going back and forth, like exactly what you said, I think you're much more mature than I am, because better to like act where we are and slowly make progress, because it's more Damodar, do you have anything to add to that?
I wanted to comment on what he said previously about when you were asking your question about, like, you're bewildered that what actually is the goal. We thought that liberation was the goal, you know? And you were saying, like, Bhagavad Gita talks about getting free from birth and death. The Bhagavad Gita And I like what you said, like it helps us to put things in perspective. And Bhagavad Gita actually is considered to be like a bachelor's degree, like it's the first study of transcendence, of understanding bhakti. But a higher level than that is actually the Bhagavatam. Like Bhagavad Gita gives us the basis and the knowledge to start understanding the concepts of the Bhagavatam. But the Bhagavatam actually talks about a higher level of devotion and bhakti and goes into more depth. Like Bhagavad Gita gives us a good basis, but the Bhagavatam helps us to get into more of what are the details of this bhakti. And actually the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, or the Nectar of Devotion, is actually the Bhagavatam. It's a different way of presenting the Bhagavatam. Like it's presenting the Bhagavatam in a systematic, study way. So all these topics are actually from the Bhagavatam. So yes, and I mean we're studying the Bhagavad Gita on Tuesdays, and also we did a little bit of that in the Shishupanishad. A lot of the concepts are there from that. But this is definitely a higher level of discussion of bhakti. And of course, we're just kind of seeing an overview of introducing these ideas. You know, let's not forget that this course is a overview. I like how much we're able to get into it. But like this is just the beginning of the Nectar of Devotion. Like the book is just like, you know, it's an ocean. It's an ocean. We're just like putting our feet in and testing the waters. But just to give us an idea of the proper mood of approaching bhakti. And then we'll be able to relish what's in the Nectar of Devotion. If we have this mood, then everything else in the Nectar of Devotion, when it describes Krishna, describes his qualities, describes his relationship, it will make more sense. Any last comments, Brihat?
Sorry, no, I have to run, but
Yeah, that's the end. I was just letting.
Okay.
If anybody wants to say something before we end.
No, thank you. That was fantastic.
Thank you. And so next week is going to be Brihat. We're looking forward to hearing you about the purity of devotional service.
Well, I probably be mostly from an intellectual platform and not much from a realized practical platform. But yes, I look forward to being here again.
And we're looking forward for that. And so next week's going to be our last for the summer, our last class on Nectar of Devotion. And then after that, we can keep going with the Sangha on different topics, but we'll officially take a stop for the classes. Okay. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.
Krishna.
Have a good
Hare
evening.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Haribol.
Haribol, everybody.